years, and one year I was teaching K1 multi-age, and I had the microphone because I had a student who needed that, and the kids told me I was like Britney Spears, and that just made me feel so good. So. But anyways, I'm glad that y'all are taking time today. We know how important it is for you all as the leaders of your building to have understanding and knowledge and time to kind of think about this in order to make this initiative successful. You all are key in that. You're leading your building. You are setting the culture. And so today we want to dive a little bit deeper into what is personalized learning. And so we appreciate you taking the time. I think I met a lot of you all. How many of you all were here in July? Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Well, actually not here in this building, but with us for our day of learning, and we were over at the General Morgan. And so today we're going to dive a little bit deeper. You know, we kind of skimmed the surface. We did our graffiti gist, and we looked at what is personalized learning, and we also talked a little bit about literacy. But today we're going to dive deeper into the personalized learning, and then also look at some data from your school, a little bit of that, and then a little bit later, kind of dive even deeper into learning spaces and learning environments. So that's going to kind of be our bulk of our time together. After we do that, then Richard and I think Richard and Pam, and John are going to kind of wrap it up. But we are going to talk a little bit more about how we are supporting your teachers. So the bulk of the learning will be for you all, but then we want to kind of go into how are we supporting your teachers, what are the coaches doing, how are you all using the coaches, kind of a little bit more of the nuts and bolts at the end. So that's going to be our time together today. So let's dive into personalized learning a little bit more. So how do you learn best? I want you to think about how do you learn best? Just kind of reflect on that for a minute. How do you like to learn best? And just turn and talk to a partner. Share how you learn best, and maybe what's the last thing you learned and how did you learn it? Okay, it can be for professional or personal. So I'll share mine. I know that I like to learn best. I'm not really one to read instructions. I like to just kind of jump right in and try things out, then maybe talk to somebody about it, and then maybe if I really need to, I'll go back and read something, right? If I really can't figure it out, I'm going to go back and read something, but I just like to fiddle and figure it out. And so when I get something new, a new toy or a new tech toy or something, I just want to jump right in. All right, so share with your partner, how do you like to learn best, and maybe what was the last thing that you learned?
A little bit more comfortable.
One more minute. All right. finish up your conversation and we'll come on back together. I know you all are like totally in sync. All right, so how many of you all had something similar? Anybody have any? Okay, you want to? Anybody want to share? Just share out what was similar. Anybody? Y'all want to share?
We like to sit and take notes and discuss our learning with others, so really kind of collaborate, but we're more of the sit and get. We like to sit and receive instruction and take notes.
Okay, all right. Anybody else similar to these two that just shared? Okay, all right, great. Somebody share something different.
We talked about how we like to kind of do it, struggle through it.
Struggle through it.
And the more you struggle with it and figure it out, the better it is.
Okay, all right, great. This table, did y'all have anything in common or?
Yeah, and I think also your auditory.
The auditory,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So maybe a little bit similar to this group here, auditory
Well, and jumping in. You know.
and jumping in. Okay, so maybe a combination.
I can read the directions like you were saying. I'd rather someone tell me. Like I struggle through it first, but then I want somebody to
Walk me through it, yeah. I think that's the part that I like with the talking about it. Okay. Did y'all have any commonalities or differences?
We all were a little different, I think.
You all were a little different.
Yeah.
The common denominator is that we all like to talk about it.
Okay.
But
At some point in the process.
At some point in the process, you like to dialogue. So there are 12 of us, or 12 of you all in the room, a few more of us in the room, but of the 12 of you all, they're very different learning styles, aren't there? Learning preferences, the way that you like to learn. And so personalized learning is key for our students because just like there's 12 of us in this room, if there are 24 students or 30 students in classrooms, they all learn differently as well. They all have different learning preferences. And so personalized learning can really help teachers and help us as we try to meet the needs of all of us, right? There's nothing that is more frustrating to me than if I have to sit and listen to somebody the whole time and I never get to turn and talk. I never get to talk about it. I never just get to do it, right? But opposite of me, some people like to listen and kind of receive information. So our teachers really have a tough road to hoe in order to get our students where we want to be. But personalized learning can help them. So I think that last time in July we talked about the core principles and the RAND study that this grant is based on. And so the RAND study was that study that showed that through these core principles that students at all levels, both our struggling students as well as our students who were really high flyers, all showed improvement when there was personalized learning taking place. So it wasn't just for our lowest performing students, it wasn't just for our highest, it was all students. And I don't have that slide up here, but I'm happy, I can add that back, and if you all are interested, but it is all from that RAND study. And so in that RAND study, after they did this, they said, okay, so what is personalized learning? And personalized learning is not just, we can't achieve it just through one program, by purchasing one program. We can't achieve it by there is no set blueprint, but there were these 4 core elements that were in place in the classrooms and in the schools where students were showing this growth. And so these are the 4 that are core for our grant, for our Rural Life grant. And in the RAND study, they had these 4, and then in the middle are ours for the Rural Life grant, and they go a little bit deeper into those things. And so teachers are customizing instruction for the student that is adaptive to the student's needs, progress, and objectives. So teachers are customizing really that kind of individualization there. Then the pace. Students cover material at different paces, right, based upon their needs. That's a tough one, right? That's a little bit harder, but we can get there. But we first have to know, in my mind, we first have to know what the students need, what the objectives are, before we can get to that pace. And really key to all of that is learner profiles. We have to know our students. We have to know more about our students than just what their reading score is or their reading level is, but we have to know our students. And so those learner profiles are really key there. And then we need to be able to reconfigure our schedules as well as think about our learning environments. So those are the 4 key things. And these are the things that your coaches have been really diving deep on, working with your lead teachers. And your lead teachers back in June, when they came for 2 days, we really dove into these 4 areas. All right. So we're going to give you an opportunity. Again, you have a different lens than our coaches have. You have a different lens than the teachers have, because you have to figure out, how do you support them in these things? How do you make time for teachers? How do you make sure that you can coach them, right? That when you go in to do observations or when you have a conversation with the teacher, you can, you know what they need. So you have a different lens. And that's kind of what we're going to take a look at today. So I think that some of us like to hear about it. Others of us like to experience it. And some of us like to see it. And so we're going to try to kind of get at those different ways. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have you experience personalized learning. We want you to experience, and again, this isn't the hard, fast way that teachers have to do it, but this is one way. And so we want you to experience personalized learning. And so you're going to experience it through a pathway. And this pathway, the learning objective is personalized learning. So understanding the 4 core components of personalized learning. And you're not going to have time to work through this entire pathway, but I am going to give you a little bit of time. So let me show you what you're going to do. The first step is to determine your pathway. And the way you're going to do that, we're going to use this document here. So you'll need to just type into your toolbar this goo.gl/TE8EDF, and it is case sensitive. And if you, we'll get you a device. So then that way, okay. All right. So just type that into your toolbar if you need help. It's going to force you to make a copy when you type that in. Okay, you want us to work together? Okay, perfect. Oh, you have to sign in. Okay. Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Denise. Yep, okay, good, you're there. Yep, and it's just going to ask you to make a copy of the document. That way everybody can have their own copy. Once you're there, make sure everybody else at your table is there. Just kind of, everybody get into it. It will make you log into Google, I think, if you've logged out of your account. All right. I'm just going to show you up here, give you a couple directions, and then set you off for a few minutes to explore this on your own. So this is what the pathway looks like. And remember, we said our first step is to determine which pathway you're going to take. So that's step 1. So the way you determine it, which the directions are written here for those of you who are auditory, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to do a quick pre-assessment, a self-assessment. You'll see, so you'll look here and think about, are these things in place? And pick a particular classroom that you want to think about. So are these things in place, or is this an area for growth? You don't have to worry about filling out too much of this. If we had more time, we would ask you to fill this out. But this is just a quick pre-assessment, okay, or self-assessment. Once you decide if all of these are growth areas for you, then you're just going to pick one of the areas. If only one is a growth area, then you're going to select that one. So that's determining your pathway. Okay. The next thing you're going to do is so let's say that I collect information about each student in order to get to know their interest. If that's a growth area for me, that's the one area that I need growth in. My next step is to expand my understanding. So I'm going to go to the yellow part, which is learner profiles, and I'm going to follow the directions here. You'll see that I first need to do this, then I select 2 of the following. Now, some are videos. The ones that have arrows are videos. The others are text that you'll read. We do have earbuds here, so if you want earbuds, you can do that. So that's step 2, expanding your understanding. And then step 3, you probably won't get to do all of step 3, which is share your understanding, which is down here. And so that's the assignment, to share what you have learned. You probably won't have time to do a Google Slides or Adobe Voice, but I will ask you to come back and share with somebody else. Okay? All right? So during this personalized, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. Okay? During this 20 minutes, you can sit right here. If you don't want to use the earbuds, if you want to kind of go out in the hallway, I guess you could go sit outside, but 20 minutes, you can go explore, sit where you're comfortable, spread out, or just stay at your table. Everybody understand, so first do the self-assessment, and then pick your pathway. Okay? All right, 20 minutes to explore. If you want to work with a partner, you can. Okay, perfect. John got you all set up. Yeah, so you could choose which area you want to dive more into, and then based on the color, and then you'll go down and do your learning.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
Guardians, but I've just never seen that word.
I've never seen that word either. I'm going to have to look it up. Gosh, I wonder if you highlight it and put it into your... If you can even... Yeah. I don't know what that is either.
Put it here.
If you copy it, if you do Control-C, Control-C, and then let's just open up a new browser, and let's paste it in there, and let's see. So Control-V is paste.
Mallory language.
There you go. I learned something new. Me too. So now you can go back to it. There it is there. Or yes, wherever you were.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to help you kind of move along a little bit. If you haven't already determined your pathway, go ahead and kind of pick which area you want to dive a little bit deeper into. I know. I bought a big one. I was like, oh, I like one. All right. I know you probably didn't have time to go on to step 3 in the pathway, but what I want you to do at your tables is share what you learned. So take a couple minutes and share something that you learned, something that stood out to you. Just kind of have that talking time. And I'll give you 4 or 5 minutes to kind of share as a table.
My Tier 1 students, they selected their Tier 1 program this year, and it was a Tier 1 based off of different competencies. So my art teacher is doing something on geometrics, art history, and art design. Taking that, they're still the literary, they're still the math, but she's approaching it from her field. My music teacher is doing readers theater, so she's doing for that Tier 1. They take the class they get together and they rotate every 9 weeks. So we got a memory.
All right. If you'll take another 30 seconds and kind of wrap up your conversation.
Yeah.
But that, I think making sure each child that you are supposed to is first, making sure each child has the
Which one?
making sure each child stuff like
No.
that's good. What they did was they just
Oh,
it was
where
a student connection and
do they
just
write
said-
us what they know about the student? Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Right. Okay. You've shared at your tables. Anybody want to share out? Have something that you learned, or a resource maybe that you viewed that you think would be good for others in the room to take a look at. So something you learned or a resource that you thought was particularly helpful.
I thought the video there in the last section, the competency-based progression, the
Okay.
Ed Elements video, the last one.
Yeah, so the Ed Elements video, the last section, the competency-based progression.
Yeah, I thought
Right.
that was powerful because it's really, they shifted away from calling it an initiative or a program and they really just made it a part
Of what you do.
What you do.
Yeah. You know, a lot of time, like we all in education have seen so many shifts, and from the central office, we're often getting a lot of new programs, a lot of new things coming down. And so I think that what I know from working with principals is that if you can make it part of, like, this is just what we're doing. This is all of our arrows are aligned. You know, that old covey. We have to line up all of our arrows instead of having everything going everywhere, but we have to line it up. If this is part of what we do, if this is part of our vision, things go much more smoothly, and it really does make an impact because we're not like, oh, that's going to be gone next year or in 2 years. But thank you for sharing, Brian. So that Ed Elements video is a great one about competency-based progression, and I think that that's key. Mm-hmm. That this is just part of what we do. This is how we do it. This is how we do teaching and learning. All right, great. Somebody else want to share something that stood out, or a resource that you think, something you learned?
In creating learner profiles, the videos in Edutopia, making sure that every student is known.
Yeah.
It goes really well with what Joe Murphy talks about, having pastoral care with each student and having a hip-to-hip relationship with each student, making sure that each student is known in your building by name and face. And then, do you know something personal about that student? And do you know their academic progression?
Yes.
So just having teachers at the beginning of the year put rosters on the wall and putting a check mark, each teacher putting a check mark if they know that person by face and name, and then a check mark if they can tell something personal about that kid, and then a check mark if they can talk about their academic abilities. And then looking at kids that don't have that check mark.
Yeah. Who are those crack?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ones that we don't know anything
And
about.
developing an action plan to make sure that those kids feel loved and involved and included in the school.
Yeah. That's a huge piece. And I love that. I'm not familiar with his work, but I'm going to have to go look at the pastoral care. But I'm going to have to look that up. But the hip to hip, like knowing every student, and that is a great video there with that. All right. Anybody else want to share? Thank you for sharing.
I looked at the Wisconsin School District, Racine Unified School District, and they're right below Milwaukee, and they're doing a lot of really interesting things with the competency-based learning. And we were just reflecting in Washington County that we're about halfway there with that. And for us, the next step is getting our students and parents to understand that shift.
Yes.
And the fact that, technology is not a crutch, but it is a great way to individualize that learning. And also be cognizant of the fact that in many of our counties and even our cities, there are still students who don't have Wi-Fi and technology at home. So making sure that you're doing that in a practical approach.
Yeah. I think you hit some really big points there with both educating our parents about what's happening, because they can be our best supporters or our, I won't call them enemies, but they can put up a lot of roadblocks for us. And so our parents are really key, but then our students. A lot of times we think, oh, kids are going to want to learn this way. But if we've kind of trained them in ways that to not learn in this way, it can be a shift, and it does take some time. We have to build in a lot of that, the processes and the social emotional piece, the social emotional learning piece is really big, because otherwise we can feel like our classroom management is out of control. And so we have to help kids and educate them just as much as our parents maybe in different ways, but we do have to get them ready. All right, great. Thank y'all for sharing. So we would have step 3, share what you've learned. You would have made something, but we just kind of, because of time, quickly kind of shared out, and you got to talk at your tables. But so in that personalized learning experience, what did you notice about it? Or how would you describe that experience? The learning that you just did. How would you describe it? Or what were some of the characteristics?
There was choice.
There was choice. Okay, there was choice there. What? There was choice based upon what? Both how you wanted to learn the information, but also by a need. So there was a self-assessment at the beginning. Now that was a self-assessment. Could you imagine in a classroom how maybe you all were adult learners, so how might I have done that if I was a teacher in a classroom? If I wanted to give some kind of either self-assessment, or it could have been a more formal assessment, right? I could have done a more formal. Can you imagine that maybe I might have checked in with each student, or like kind of had some kind of conference or something to kind of quickly make sure that everybody was on track, that Brian was on track, and that Kathy was on track, kind of where they were going, or had some kind of a little bit of a tighter protocol there. And instead of a self-assessment, it could have been a more formal assessment. Right?
One thing that this is making me think of that we've been working with this year is providing, when we give a formative assessment, we give 2 formative assessments, a formative A and B, and so we give the first assessment, we do a data conference and group our students based on performance in that first assessment. So then it's followed up by systematic reteaching or enrichment. And so I'm just thinking about like this process right here. One of the things that we've kind of that has come up as a for us is when we're looking at assessment data from the first one is if there are multiple areas that are where several students have so it could be I guess based on it could be even based on those standards.
Yes.
Whether or not, so the students would know based on their formative assessment how they did, and then be able to choose, and maybe even, if they had several needs to, they would have that selection of what's my greatest need.
Yes, that's great. And I think you hit a really key point is that having the students involved in that conversation. So it's not just that, the teacher's telling you where to go, like go do this activity, but that the students are understanding, these are my areas of need. Mm-hmm. So kind of taking on that language, I think, is really key. And that's a shift for some teachers. It's a shift for some of us to kind of think in that way, but we do have to involve them. We know how important students are involved. So there was a pre-assessment. You also hit on that there were objectives. So there were some objectives at the top, right? These objectives were about personalized learning, but if we were looking at a classroom and we were taking this to a classroom, we could take this to any subject area, right? We could have had objectives based upon the curriculum that we were setting. What else did you notice about this experience or this? You said there was choice, there was different mediums, there was both text as well as videos. There was some control there, yeah. There was control of the learning there. How was I going to assess if you had actually learned it? I know we didn't quite get to this part yet, but there was an assessment there at the end. There was going to be an assessment to see if you've learned it. This was a more open assessment, but I could have also had a more traditional assessment at the end. There could have been that post-assessment. There could have been a writing piece. There could have been something there. As the teacher, what was I doing? I kind of was over here. I was walking around. If you all were my students, what could I have been doing with that time?
You were actively monitoring, you're using proximity.
Yeah, so I was actively monitoring, but I also could have been having those one-on-ones. I think I heard somebody. So I could have been having one-on-ones or small groups. So it freed me up to do a little bit of that. Right. Anything else about what did you see here, or how did it feel? Like, how was that to you as a learner? And it's okay if it wasn't your preference.
I will say for me, like I'm a greedy learner, So like I wanted to do it all.
You wanted to do
So
it.
the stress of like
So that was stressful.
not having all the information.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I need to take this home
To
and
go
do the
back
rest.
and do the rest, yes. And so, and that is a very real thing for a lot of our students, right? A lot of our students would feel this way. So we have to think about, maybe would I have given everybody the entire thing? Would I have given it to you in chunks? But that's a great point.
I think that piece is also motivating, though, in that had you told us, here's what you're going to do, go through these sections, it would have been more of a checklist type of thing that, did I get through this versus, when there's some choice in the matter, there's a little bit of a motivation piece that might not otherwise exist.
Yeah, and so maybe I'm a little bit more motivated and kind of curiosity, like, I wonder what else is in that other section versus here is your worksheet or here is your thing. Everybody's going to sit and do this one and then everybody's going to do the next one. Even if I wanted my students to do all of these sections, giving them the choice of maybe about what they learn first. So it's, and some of it's a little bit of, there's a little bit of play in there, a little bit of propaganda. Anything else?
Say too that you provided some reflection time within the group, which then sparked more curiosity.
Now you're like, oh, I want to go watch those others. Yeah.
Check that out as well. So just having those opportunities for them to reflect, I think, is also important.
Yeah.
Or you could have been a bubble kid like me and said, I'm going to keep myself occupied for 20 minutes.
That's right.
Because I know she's going to go over this and tell me what I need to know.
That's right. And so, we have to recognize, just like Jacqueline, right, or Jordan, I knew it was a J, that Jordan wanted to, like,
She's going to look at everything,
everything, right? Now, I would have been with you.
You walked around and I was watching a video and I was good with that.
Yep.
You see?
Yep. And I probably would have been your kind of learner lead, or Tracy. Tracy, I was probably your learner in school. So, because you know what I really wanted to do? I really wanted to be talking to somebody about it.
Me too.
And so.
But I'm a pleaser. I was doing exactly what you
Yes.
wanted me to do, which was watch that.
Right. So we have to figure out, how do we meet the Tracys or the Nancys of our classroom? That you all were really quiet in here, but I think, and some of you were quietly talking, but I think that when we think about personalized learning, it isn't always quiet, and so we might want to have different areas of the room. For those of you who want to talk about your learning and to work with a partner, come over here to this area of the room. Those of you who want to work quietly, here, and then those of you who want to learn first and then talk, you can sit at your desk, then go back this, or some way to think about all of our students. Just like we, at the beginning of the day, we talked about, like, how do we like to learn best? There are different kinds of learners. And so I think you're exactly right. And we have to remember, some of the kids are just going to go through it, or they're just going to sit there and not really do anything, and then wait until I tell them. And so how do I make sure that I check in with those kids? I have to know my students well enough to know which ones are going to do that, but also maybe there's some things that I can set up. Okay, great. So I want you now to think about, so that was, and hopefully you can imagine, you're more than welcome to take that back and share that with your teachers. Do this activity with your teachers. There were 3 areas in that pathway. So the 4th area from our RAND that was missing was the learning spaces. I do have one of these with learning spaces on it. I left it off for you all because we're going to take a look at that, or the learning environments and the flexible schedule, because we're going to take a deeper look as a whole group together on that one. But if you want this pathway with all 4 of those areas, we can get that to you. I can get that to you. But feel free to take this back and do this with your teachers. Might be something, because could you imagine how they might take something like this, a template like this, and adapt it to doing something like that in their classroom? And again, it doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to, but this is one idea. But I think there are some key things that you would probably want to point out to them. There was an objective. There was a learning objective. So this wasn't just willy-nilly, go learn about whatever you want to learn about. There was a learning objective. So they would put their learning objective. There was some kind of assessment to help students know where to go. And that could have been a more formal assessment or not. And then there was a way for you to check their understanding or make sure that they mastered the content. And again, this one is more open-ended. You all might have more of a more traditional test at the end. But I think if I was going to do this with my teachers, I would point out those 3 things that were key. All right. Any other questions or thoughts about that experience or the pathway? All right. So I want you now just to think for a minute. In your building, think about a particular classroom. what does the learning, what do you see, hear, and feel when you walk into some of those classrooms? And I'm not going to ask you to share out, but I just want you to kind of think about that for a minute, and how might that compare to some kind of personalized learning experience? So maybe think about a teacher that you feel like is really a high flyer, or on the right path, and then maybe think about the teacher that is really struggling. And how does that compare? How do those teachers' classrooms compare to what you would maybe hope to see in personalized learning? Yeah, I want you to reflect. I wasn't going to ask you to share out, but Brian, are you wanting to share out?
Oh, no, that's fine.
You want to talk about it, right?
Well, I was just going to, there's a distinct control release issue that's evident between the two.
Between the two. Between what you just or your highest flying teacher and your teacher that's struggling. Yeah.
Oftentimes, the teachers that are struggling, there's a little bit of a control issue too, that they're really unwilling to kind of release
that
some of that over to the students for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is something we didn't talk about during your personalized learning experience. I mean, we did a little bit that I walked around, but that I was using proximity control. But maybe pointing out that where did I have control in that personalized learning experience? Or what was I wasn't standing and delivering content, but what did I have kind of control over in that experience?
You had control over the planning and
I planned the activity. I found the right resources. And so, maybe if that's a way to kind of help some of the teachers see, you may not be standing up and delivering content, but you still have control over choosing what they are, the resources that they're using, or the articles that we're reading. And we did this digitally, but did you have to do that all digitally? I mean, the videos you would have to watch but you could have had text printed out, or it could have been things from a textbook. Read, find these things. If you want to watch the video, go to the computers that are at the, if you only have a set amount of computers, when you're ready to go do that. But that's a great point, Brian, the release of control versus those who are maybe the highest flyers, or those the personalized learning versus those that are kind of struggling. All right. So now that you kind of have some of those classrooms in mind and just thinking about that, I want you to kind of keep that in your head, because that is one thing, as you're trying to shift your vision, how do you move all of your teachers forward? Right? How do you move them towards that vision, and what are some of the ways? You experience personalized learning. I want you to now see a little bit of it in action. And some of the videos that you had on the pathway helped you to see it a little bit more, but we're going to watch it as a group. We're going to take a look. We're going to go to Wisconsin, to a middle school there. And as you watch this personalized learning, I want you to maybe split down the middle, or I know some of you have 3. So I want some of you to be ones. And the ones are going to be looking at it from a teacher perspective. So what is the role of the teacher in this video as you look at this experience, and what key elements made this type of learning possible? What did the teacher have to do in order to make this personalized learning possible? If you're a 2, you're going to look at the students. So what is the role of the students, and how are the students empowered? Okay. So quickly decide who at your table is going to be a 1 and who's going to be a 2. All right, and let's travel to Wisconsin to Flight Academy.
Middle school, I think my biggest memory is 4 walls, 30 desks.
A different teacher for everything, and chaos in between.
Constant movement, constant shifting, one classroom to another. Everybody focus on your project, kind of stay under. Pretty much sat there all day listening to lectures. I didn't like most truthfully when I was her age at all.
It was nothing like this. We're not preparing today's learners for your future. We're preparing them for theirs. If we educate learners as though the future is predictable,
we're shortchanging. Well, if you're rapid change, you'll be unpredictable.
If it keeps going, don't take it out. Wait till it stops.
Why do we ask kids to just sit in a room and listen to one person for hours on end and expect that they're going to be able to take something away from it? If we can engage them in the experience and have them be an active participant in it, that's really when we're going to start to see change happening.
Since becoming a mom, I've realized that all kids have special needs, and I want those needs to be addressed on a daily basis. I want them to be able to learn what it is that they're passionate about and what they love. We can't talk about history without talking about science. We can't talk about history without talking about math. All of these things are interrelated.
Krista Crowder and I had been teaching on the 7th grade team, so I approached her and I said, I think I want to do something different. We really spent a whole year in development of trying everything from how we teach to setting up physical space to furniture within a space. It was really that collaboration that built this idea of what are we going to do. The Applied Academy stands for Facilitating Learning Through Innovation, Guidance, High Expectations, and Technology. We are a specialized program within a traditional middle school.
I want each kid to be setting their own goals, knowing what they want to work on in all their different subject areas, and really having different paths for each one of our students.
Learning is like a different thing for every single person. Like they have high expectations for us. They give us high school work sometimes. It's kind of crazy, but they challenge us in a way that we're trusted with a lot of responsibility.
I have advanced humanities since I wanted to grow more as I'm a writer and a reader as well.
The one-on-one advisor is like a conference. We have it every week where we get to talk about like what I've been working on and see how far I am in a certain thing.
That's good. All right, thank you.
The role of educators in that environment is subtle, it's nuanced, but it is constantly supporting the learner as opposed to demonstrating the expertise of that educator. That it is all about learning, not just about instruction.
Getting to a structured policy change might take some time. Getting it right in the forefront with students today is a huge benefit to our system during this time of transition. And for the most part, everything we're doing happens at the local level, where the best decisions are made, where we have the greatest source of impact. And it's really where ultimately the user is, or our student.
I believe the department does exhibit empathetic leadership, where you understand the interaction that has to happen at the local state level. As parents see the value of personalized learning, they push that at the local level. And as different districts see things going on, they want to emulate the ones that are successful. They tend to take pride in regional achievement and success.
I kind of learned that I like the freedom of learning. I know that he's happy, and I know that he's really learning because he comes back with the solution himself. I really like just exploring everything, and that's exactly what play offers. It's allowed me to be a lot more independent at school and at home.
What I've learned about my daughter is that she is infinitely more capable than I ever thought she was.
In elementary school, I didn't get all my work done and stuff, but now it's definitely first and basis to get my work done, turn all my stuff in, and be a positive influence to the others.
All right, talk at your tables for a minute. 1s and 2s, share your different perspectives, and then we'll share out as a whole group. From the teacher's perspective and from the student's perspective.
Really impressed with the fact that
continue to fully submit. It's not just kids are working on their own, monitoring the behavior, but still continuing to focus on recovering and some of that. When this type of thing, if you need something great that's planned, but then look at monitoring it versus continuing to have that kind of focus on what learning is about. Take it to the next level and show how do we know students are learning? I guess using performance to really ask how.
So what did you notice, Teacher Watcher?
But I have to get beyond that. And the second thing I put is that your teacher always has to be prepared ahead and thinking ahead of where the students are, because if the students do finish or do come up
because
All right, let's come back together and share out. So let's start with the students. What was the role of the students, or how were the students empowered within the learning environment?
I felt like the students were driving their instruction by setting their goals, and having those individual learning paths.
Yeah. Students were definitely a big partner in the learning. They were driving it. What would we say to our teacher who watches this video, or going back to Brian's example, our teacher who wants control over this? What would we say to our teacher that says, there's no way we can do that, I can't give up that control to my students? And they probably wouldn't use those words, right? But they might use those words, right? They might. So what could we say to our teachers that say that?
For the teachers, you're in control of the planning, because this kind of learning is going to take a lot of planning.
It takes a lot of planning. You're in control of the planning, and you're going to help them, right? You're going to guide them. You're going to be their guide. They are still, again, they're not learning Fortnite. They're not setting their goals and saying, I want to be the best Fortnite or achieve that. There are goals, but you have to help them see where they are now and where they want to go. But the student has to be a partner, has to be in that. Right?
I think all the students that spoke, they just talked so positively about what it gave them, that freedom of learning, and that they were trusted. And I think when kids feel that you have high expectations for them, and that's what I preach every day, high expectations. And if you convey that to them, then they're going to try to reach that and give them the opportunity. I know when I was in school, oh my gosh, I would have loved to have had the opportunity to learn at my own pace.
Yes.
And research and delve into it, and I could have learned a lot more than being with that constraint that you have to sit there. Even though I know this already, and Brian needs some help, he needs to go a little slower maybe.
Right.
I'm bored.
Yes.
And I want to move forward.
Yes.
We'll go with that.
Right. We'll go with it. Yeah, I think they will. And it always impresses me, no matter how many times I've seen that video, it impresses me to watch those students and to think that's what we want for all of our students, isn't it? We want our students to all articulate in that way.
To tag on to what Kathy and Lisa was saying, with the individualized learning, with them setting their own pace, they also have to know where they're at.
Yeah, they have to know where they're at.
you noticed the teacher was having a weekly conference with the student. And some of our teachers are doing that, and some of our teachers aren't really on board with that. But how is a kid supposed to get to the end of the tunnel if they don't know how to get there or where they're at within the tunnel? So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, so our teacher, we're going to go back to, I'm going to keep on going back to Brian, but maybe not even in control, but the teacher who says, this is too chaotic. I can't handle this. How do I manage this? And because how are they supposed to know where they are in their learning? So what would we say to that teacher? Going to your point, Mark, or anybody, but
I would say the student needs to be tracking with you. They could have a data folder. They could be doing it online. It could be a weekly thing where there are other students are working in small group and you're one-on-oneing with.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways you can do it.
Yeah. So set up a process. But I love that what you said. Students have to be tracking it with you. So that means they need to know the information. And a data folder, whether you do it online. I used to use data notebooks, and I taught K1 multi-age, but I also taught 5th grade, like different years, not all in the same year. But I did data notebooks with all of my students, and so having them track that progress is huge. And we can. I will say, when I've worked with teachers and with schools that do it, it is a little bit easier to start, I think, on paper, pencil versus starting digitally, just because it seems more manageable, right? We don't have to get over the technology hump in tracking progress. But if you're already there and tracking progress digitally, that's awesome. But if you're trying to get a teacher to start, maybe they start with a folder, Great, thank you. Anything else for the student's perspective? When I watched that video, I also noticed they're definitely not in rows. There was, I saw some traditional seating in that I think there were some desks that maybe looked like the armed desks, but they had kind of moved them into kind of a horseshoe. And I didn't ask you to necessarily look at the learning environment, but I've seen this video a lot. So, but they kind of moved them into a horseshoe. And so even if there was some really cool furniture too, but even if they didn't have all that cool furniture, they had taken some of the traditional and moved it around. So it looked like students were kind of working sometimes in small groups, sometimes in large groups. Definitely we saw the one-on-one. And I'm sure there was some direct instruction as well, right? There was some direct instruction, but there was a lot of different. Okay. What about from the teacher's perspective? What was the role of the teacher? And let's start with that. The role of the teacher first, and then we'll take the second question.
You talked about just the importance of clarity of learning, just being clear on the expectation for what students were to do, and just the alignment of collecting the resources and then making sure that there was clarity on what the product was at the end, so that there wasn't it wasn't just a situation where the people who were learning were with the teacher, but that all people were engaged, that it went somewhere.
Yes. So the teacher had to be really clear and explicit in what they wanted and what they expected, and to ensure that everybody was learning. I love that you pointed that out, Holly. There was also this, the teacher was clear, but the role of the teacher was both small group facilitator. We saw that individual conversing. Okay. What else did you notice about the teacher? Anything else? Yeah, they were collaborative. That's key. There was collaboration there. And I think that is important for our teachers, that even if you're not, some of us like to prefer to work more individually, but I think there has to be some kind of collaboration. You can't do it all on your own. Even if it's, you don't necessarily want to share your classroom like these teachers did, but that you need to be bouncing ideas off of somebody at some point, because that's how we get better. And so we have to have some point of collaboration. Right? What key elements made this type of learning possible? So what did the teacher do in order to make this possible for the students?
I mean, it's not just something that, one day you can just
start doing.
Yes. It really has to be modeled, structured, and someone said planning. There has to be a lot of intentional planning.
Yeah.
And, the teacher basically becomes a facilitator, and you have that age-old question, who's working hardest in your classroom? And the teachers seems with individualized, personalized learning, it's the student, and that's what we want to see. So.
So the teacher did a lot of planning beforehand. It took time, so that the teacher had to have the time, and then they became the facilitator. I would also add that there had to be probably a lot of processes in place or structure. There was structure, even though it looked a little chaotic. And we're not in there, on a daily basis, or we're not. We kind of got a snapshot, but I would say that it kind of, in some ways, looked chaotic. But students all seemed to know what they were doing. So, in order to make this type of learning possible, we have to set up those processes and those structures. And one thing that I was working with a teacher recently, and I'm coaching a school, and working with a teacher, and the teacher said, it's just not working. I just can't do it, right? And so what I said to this teacher was, okay, you need to involve your students in solving the problem, right? You can't just come back and say, okay, we're not going to learn this way anymore, or we're not going to, but how can we involve, through coaching, I led up to this, right? But that involving the students in solving the problems that you're seeing. So if it seems too chaotic, or the noise level's too loud, or we're not all turning in our work on time, whatever the problem is that the teacher sees, a big piece of this is involving the students. The students aren't just involved in marking their own progress, but they're involved in the classroom setup and in the processes. So maybe you go back to that teacher, Brian's teacher, who, it's not only the control, but they say, it's just too chaotic. Okay, well, let's set up some processes. And when those things go awry, or when it's not going quite as you want to, involve the students. Involve the students. We all know at the beginning of the year we want to involve our students in setting up our rules or our community, but we shouldn't just leave it at that, right? Throughout the year, we need to come back together. Okay, things aren't working. Guys, this just isn't working for me. I was working with a small group and I was interrupted 10 times while I was trying to work with my small group. How can we solve this problem? How can we figure out, because I need to give them their attention, So let the kids help solve the problems. All right. Any other thoughts? All right. I think this is a perfect time. We're going to just take like a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to dive into a little bit of the data from your school. Take a look at your school a little bit more. Okay. All right. Did everybody get an email yesterday from John, or with the data in it? If you didn't, John can help you get that data, or if you have gotten 55 emails since then and you're not exactly sure where that is, I think John can help you with that. But let's talk a little bit, dive into a little bit now, looking at some of your data. We've experienced personalized learning. We've seen it a little bit in action. And now let's look at some of the data that was collected from your teachers back at the beginning of the year. And again, this data is based on, or the survey questions were from that RAND study. So remember the RAND study around personalized learning?
This is the survey I sent you and bugged you to death about. Please send this out, please send this out, please send this out. Please
there you go, exactly.
And I'm such a non-survey person, it's me asking for it too, so I felt a little bad for all the past surveys I had completed in my life.
A little bit more about this, about the survey, and Richard, jump in if I miss anything, but this survey will be part of one of the measures that is used to determine the effectiveness of the project. So this is administered at the beginning of the year, it'll be administered again at the end of the year, and then the same for next year as well.
It also included the control schools, not only the treatment schools right now, so the control schools were also involved in that survey.
Yes. And so this focused on personalized learning, those 4 core areas in there. And, I think it's oftentimes we ask our teachers to take surveys, or we take surveys ourselves, but we never really see the results, or we never really spend time looking at that. And so today we don't have too much time, but we do want to spend a little bit of time just looking at this and also seeing across all of the treatment schools What did the results say? We won't have time to dig into every question, but we are going to take a couple of questions and just kind of look there with that. A couple of you all asked about the slides or the videos. I am working, I'm not quite finished, but I will before the end of the day, before we leave here. I'm going to put them all, both this as well as the one from July, onto a website that we're using for the lead teachers and coaches so that you'll have access to those. Okay, so I'm getting all those there because I think that that'll probably be good in case, if you want to go back and show the Flight Academy video to your teachers or you want to use some of these things. So just wanted to mention that. So we're not going to start at question 1. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit. But questions 13 through 15 talked about about implementing personalized learning. And so the results that I have up here are across all of the treatment schools, and you're welcome to pull up your own. But I just want you to kind of take a look at 13 through 15. So questions 13 through 15. And again, these are like, what are the biggest obstacles in you implementing personalized learning? So across all of the schools, their own knowledge of how to effectively implement personalized learning was lower. The lack of flexibility in curriculum required to teach was a little bit more. Excessive time needed was pretty close with the pressure to cover specific material for state standards. This was across all the schools. I'm going to give you a minute to look at it for yours. These are questions 13 through 15, kind of covered these obstacles. And I want you probably won't have enough time to discuss with your whole table unless you have just 3 people, but so you all could probably all talk together. But those of you who have more than 3, with a partner, talk about, are you surprised by the responses from your school? Okay, what kind of stood out to you for these questions 13 through 15? So just pick up one partner unless there's just 3 of you, and just kind of share.
Your back hurt from carrying me today. I'm sorry.
No judgment here, just kind of, what did you think, and are you surprised by the responses?
And your teachers have 90 minutes of planning your block.
Teachers are rioting against the man.
Exactly.
So they're saying that they don't have enough time for planning?
Yeah, apparently.
Wow.
I don't know
That's
where
a major obstacle.
That is a major obstacle. But now how were they with, do they understand the personalized learning?
No, I would say not.
Yeah, but did they come across that say, yeah.
And that's what I was saying. Do they really even understand what the question is? Is where it says personalized learning, but is that, are they thinking that's personalized teaching, not personalized learning?
Yes, right.
So,
yeah. And I'll make sure that you have the pathway that we went through.
Oh, okay, good.
From earlier.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we'll make sure, and then I can kind of talk you through it. Richard can talk you through it.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll look over it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. If you'll wrap up your conversation. Okay. So, data can be interpreted a lot of ways. And sometimes as principals, we live and die by our data, unfortunately, or But I think an important thing to think about is this is only one piece. So what you observe every day, the conversations you have are also really important pieces of data as well. So this is being used for the study, but it is good to kind of to think about and maybe then ask some questions. And maybe even want to share this data with your staff and kind of go back and say, all right, guys, even pulling out of some of these and having some follow-up conversations. I know one that really surprised me as I looked across all of the schools was their own knowledge of how to effectively implement personalized learning. That wasn't an obstacle for a lot of people. So. Yes, I think a lot of you all kind of were feeling that same way too, right? Very interesting. So, and that's always part of anything like this. Maybe by the end of the year, after they've learned a little bit more about what personalized learning is, I wonder if a lot of them will come back and now say, "Whoa, okay." All right, let's go on to the next set. So these are questions 6 and 7. These are questions 6 and 7, and These are students and students' ownership of personalized learning. So this is the student aspect. Remember, just like in the Flight Academy, we just talked about what is the teacher's perspective and what are the students' perspective. This is how students are taking ownership. And so across all of the schools, you see to great extent, moderate to small, and then the darkest is not at all. And so it's really interesting that students have opportunities to choose what instructional materials, whether it's books, computer software. I might have put in the word video, right, if we think about our personalized learning. So across that, students are really not having an opportunity to do that at all. Across all of our schools, a few of them, it was to great extent. But most of them, it was not at all or small extent of students having any ownership. When we look here, topics to focus on, okay, again the same, but then students keeping track of their own learning progress. And maybe the using technology is a tough piece there because maybe they are, but it's not using technology. But I will say that this is an interesting one that still, a lot more say students are actually doing this. So that kind of jumped out to me. So have a conversation, look at your own data for a few minutes, and then have a conversation. What do you notice there? And how are these obstacles in moving towards personalized learning? If, we talked about students and everything that we saw in Flight Academy and how students were empowered, but what do you notice about your data and how what your teachers are saying about how your students involved might be an obstacle towards getting to that personalized learning or towards your vision? Give you a little bit of time here with these two. look at your data here, questions 6 and 7, and then you can have some time to talk.
This is where the page
Yeah, time and choice I've had with
So this, what we're looking at here is based on because when you're not tracking
with technology.
The flexibility component was lower as a minor. It was a minor obstacle compared to everything. The other two were major, and I would think that they're all connected.
Yeah, right. And
I was like, that to me didn't line up.
Sometimes, yeah.
I mean, I understand that maybe they have the flexibility of present how they want to present their curriculum and
right,
assess
but
it,
the material's covered.
Right. Yeah.
You think it would be.
Yeah. So they don't, they don't really have that much flexibility. If a student really likes, animals and they're learning, something in science about it, they still can't just personalize
and go that way.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. That kind of was curious to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe a good point, like a good opportunity for some conversation. To pull, with your teachers at a staff meeting, just to kind of ask or to say, like, hey, even if you don't share them every question, but pull out a couple that are really interesting to you, and like let them kind of respond, or what do we think we need, or maybe set up a protocol to kind of to let them at least respond
and they may not understand.
Yeah, they might, and it might come about that they didn't understand, or I thought this meant this. And,
Right, and the last one with the personal learning, they probably don't have a good. They might think, I personalize. I let them make it up when they have to, or turn it in late when they have to.
Right. Yeah. Would help them, right? And you could maybe even set up something kind of like what we've done, like let them dive into personalized learning a little bit, and then look at the date. So let's like kind of the same way that we've done it a little bit too. All right, let's go on to our last section that we're going to look at, which is question 5. And question 5 is about the learning environments. So question 5, across all of the schools, this was a question about do different layouts and physical spaces exist within your school? And you can see that traditional, easy to rearrange classroom furniture was definitely evident in a lot of our schools, but some not so much. So I wonder if it's the easy to rearrange classroom furniture is maybe holding us back there. Comfortable non-traditional classroom furniture. A lot of people said that that existed, and it definitely facilitates personalized learning, and then we can look across the others. So look at your own data. And as you're looking at your own data, I want you to think about how do learning environments impact personalized learning. So how do they impact it? Go ahead and look at your own data and have a few minutes to talk about this one, this question 5.
For the computer lab, here you can see 83% said that it exists in a school
I was trying to figure out who the
know.
teachers are who said we don't have computer labs.
Yes.
Because we do.
Yeah.
We always have.
So it's a great point of conversation, right? To show maybe even these particular questions and to...
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking maybe the two who don't know are brand spanking new. Maybe that's what it is.
There you go. Okay.
It's right here, but I don't know you. Oh, you gotta have a special tool. The John Payne tool.
Yeah, John.
Thank you.
The John Payne.
Yay! Thank you.
We have whatever we covered.
I think they're pretty much every table. They're really surprised at a lot of what they're doing.
Yeah. Compared to group data. Yeah.
We didn't leave.
I this PowerPoint as well as the July one to the website. I put it on the last slide. Does somebody just mind double checking and making sure that both of those open? Just, I'll show it to them, or we can show them at the end, but then that way they have all the resources. Thank you, Pam. All right. So this is just one piece of data, but maybe a good opportunity for some conversations with your staff. And so I would suggest, even if you only choose a couple questions, just like we did today, that you take time to kind of bring these out to show the teachers what the results as aggregate, and then maybe have some conversations. Maybe you set up a protocol. Maybe if you really want to focus on the obstacles of personalized learning, maybe they could even give you some suggestions on how they could strengthen some of, if they said they don't have enough time for planning, maybe they could give some input. Or maybe you can ask them some questions about, it's really curious to me because everybody had, what stands out to you all? What do you notice? What surprises you? Asking questions like that, and then hearing their reactions might give you some more insights and a good opportunity to have some conversations around personalized learning. You may even want to do something like the Flight Academy video or the personalized pathway first, and then look at the data and kind of similar to what we did today. But I encourage you to share this, to ask questions. Again, you may not want to share the entire thing. It would take a long time, but picking out a few. Because they will go back and they will take it again at the end of the year and then again next year. So, and maybe even having some conversations about what does this actually mean? Some of the questions that you, making sure that they really understand what the question is trying to get at would then help you for next year as you move forward to really kind of get a true gauge. Because I know a lot of you had the reaction, I don't think they really understand what this means, or so several of you had that reaction. So going through and having the conversation about the data. It's always nice to see, okay, we took this, and what are we going to do with it? So maybe go back, talk with your leadership team, and figure out what is the best way to use this, or what questions would be most valuable to your teachers. So we ended with a question on learning environments and how it impacts personalized learning. And I mentioned to you that when you did the pathway, that pathway was or that particular section was left out, the use of time and space. So let's dive a little bit deeper into learning spaces. And we know that the learning spaces or the learning environment is so important. This is a very nice learning space, isn't it? The chairs are pretty comfortable, although they may not be comfortable for everybody, but the chairs are pretty comfortable. They roll around. We're not super crowded in here. It makes it a little bit easier, I think, to learn. For me, I would love some more natural light. That would be a better way to learn. But there's nice tall ceilings. It's not super loud and noisy. But learning spaces really make a huge difference, and the environment makes a big difference. So I want you to think about where you do your best work. We talked about your learning, how you learn best earlier today. I want you to now think about where do you do your best work. For me, this is my couch at home. So I do a lot of learning and work here on my couch at home. I like to be comfortable. A lot of times I'll sit with my feet up. I also enjoy working outside. So being outside in my backyard. And then at the office, I like to have a space that I can be quiet but also collaborative. And so this is a space we have with some TVs there. It's always nice to be able to have that big monitor and to talk. So I want you just to share with your table mates, where do you do some of your best work? Just quickly share.
It's really nice. Three different nice things.
And does it work?
Yes, it come on to here. And those, I'm just checking to see if those work.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that they, okay, great. Before I shared it. And if you want to add some text around that, on the site there. On our slides, principal session. Like, you can move that around, and if you want to put like links to your slides or something, or what it is. I just like, yeah, training session's perfect. All right, I'm curious. I'm not going to tell you, ask you to tell me where you work best, but do you have the same place that you like to do all of your work? Anybody have the same place? So everybody else had maybe some different spaces. Some places that you maybe like to read, some places that you like to do your emails, I don't know, we like to do emails, but some place that we like to learn, right? So different spaces, right? Different places. And I bet if we asked our students, it would probably be similar as well. If we're sitting and listening, needing to collaborate with people, we might need to have a certain space. If we're reading, we might want to put our feet up and be comfortable. And so when we think about our classrooms, we need to remember that just like we all have different places that we like to learn, and where we do our best work is different, how can we design our learning environments for that? So we're going to skip that, but 1 million minutes. 1 million minutes, that's how many minutes students, if they enter in kindergarten and go through 12th grade, that's how many minutes they spend in our buildings. 1 million minutes. It's a long time. It's a lot of time. Kids are in these buildings. And so the environment is a huge piece of the learning. And it isn't just the time they spend, but we know that research says that there are things that make learning more effective. And so we're going to take a few minutes and look at some of those things, some of those pieces of research, because we can be doing all of our best work. We can be working really hard, trying to personalize learning, to individualize, to meet the needs of every student. But if our learning environment is working against us, then we're already at a disadvantage. So just as much time as we spend in our planning, we also have to think about the environment. And I know that there are some things you have control over and other things that you don't. So I'm recognizing that, but I want to show you what the research says. Okay? So this is a study, and there are not as many. There are more and more coming out, but there aren't as many around learning environments because there are so many different factors, right? Every person is different, and so every person is affected a little bit differently by the learning environment. But we also know that this is kind of a newer topic as we begin to think about learning as well. But this is a good study, and this is from an Edutopia article, but then it links to the study. And we've put all the slides together, so we'll share those with you at the end. I'll also make sure you have the link to this study because it's a really accessible document too. But I pull out a few things from the study. And so in this study, this shows all of the factors that impact learning. Okay, you'll notice that the green are these what they call individualism. Okay, a category that they call individualism, and this has a big impact in learning. If we add it up, that's 28% is the individualism, and we're going to talk more about what is individualism and how they define it. But it is the flexibility and ownership. Okay, so this is one of the biggest factors in student achievement when we think about environment. Okay, this isn't, but when we think about environment, that 28% in individualism, the flexibility and ownership. If we go to the blue, this is a big one. This is light, temperature, and air control. This is probably one of the ones that we have the least amount of control over, but it does have a huge impact in learning. And we'll look at maybe some of the things that you or your teachers can do to impact some of those things. You know, we can't cut out windows, but there are some things we can do. But light temperature, look how big of an impact that has on learning. Pretty crazy. when you think about. And then last is complexity and color. And they call these things are things like what's on the walls and the color of the walls. All right, so let's dive a little bit more into these. They call the complexity and color the stimulation. So they call this the stimulation. So when we go back here to these two, these are stimulation. Okay? And when we look at this, they say that 20 to 50% of wall space should be clear. Okay? And I think probably in most of our middle school classrooms, we have that. Elementary school, we tend to put a whole lot on our walls. But still, it's good to think about. 20 to 50% needs to be clear, and they also say it needs to be organized. Okay, so organization is really, you can see here this is too little, so there's not enough. Then this is just right, this is way too much. Okay, so 20 to 50, but it also needs to be organized. In the complexity, in the study, they talk about visually pleasing. So it needs to look neat. Okay, I know sometimes we think, oh, it doesn't really matter, but it does. It does. And this is a big thing for teachers. We don't want to put too much up on the walls, but that is in the stimulation. In the color, which is also part of the stimulation, when we go back to this, color is important, but they say that having too much color is a bad thing. So too much in the brightness, this is not a good thing. They actually say one wall, and I don't know if you can see here, but these walls are more of a muted, and then they have one accent wall here. They show that in the study that that's about right. Bland, boring walls is not good for learning. It doesn't stimulate the brain enough. So you got to think about that too. You may or may not have control over that, but sometimes paint is the easiest thing to do. So one accent wall, they say, is kind of helpful to have that in a room. All right, y'all didn't know you were coming to a decorating class, did you? But seriously, it makes a difference. All right, naturalness. This is that category. If we go back here, this is the big one. They call this whole category naturalness. Okay, this is the one. We don't want to cover our windows. They would say this would be, don't put furniture in front of the windows. Probably also we can't do this for exits anyways, for fire marshal codes, but still, putting anything in front of any of the windows is a bad thing because natural light is the best thing. They talk about that. If we can't get natural light or too much natural light, they would say to add lamps. So if we can add lamps, now again, fire marshal, depending on who your fire marshal is, so you have to think about that. But are there ways to bring in lamps that will meet the fire marshals? But because these lights are...
Don't tell him we told you. It's okay.
Yeah. Don't tell... And it is... Cause how many of you all say... how many of you all, the fire marshal would say you can't have lamps in the room? I'm just curious. I don't know. None of them? I don't know. Because I think some... Ours, yours... Yeah, some of you. So.
It is strong.
Yes. And so yours says you can't bring in lamps?
About the cords.
The cords, yeah. Yeah, that's what I found. So sometimes it's the cord. It's when we put those, when we daisy chain those cords together. I don't like that. But if we can bring in lamps, it's a big piece. So safety is obviously utmost important, and that's what he's worried about. So we need to think about safety. But if there's a way to bring in lamps that we don't have to cord together, I think there is also, and I don't know, does anybody know about, there are different bulbs we can put in here, but I don't, I read it someplace and I haven't read it again. I need to kind of look it up. But there are different bulbs that you can put in these lights that I think are actually more efficient, but also better, they say. I'll have to do a little bit more research because I read it one place and then I haven't seen it again. But the airflow is also important. So light is important, but airflow. And so if you can open windows, opening the windows, they say it actually stimulates the brain more because of the fresh air. There is a reason why we think about, isn't that, I know. If you can't open windows, at least opening your door. So, because if we put 30 bodies in a room and, the door to the hallway now, we can't do that because of safety now. I know. Just as I said that, I was thinking, Yep. Well, all right. So there you go. But I know we can't do any of this.
Things we wish you could do.
Things we wish you could do.
If
Right?
you could actually do this, it'd be great.
Yes. So I'm curious, now are they saying, because all of this is changing so much, isn't that crazy? I mean, in the past, like even the past year with all of this, are you all allowed to, or not allowed, but is it the right practice can students like work out in the hallway? Can you have like students like working out in the hallway? Right. Okay. So, but so you can prop open your door?
Not legally.
No.
When the fire marshal's not in the building.
Okay. So you're not. So the door isn't allowed to. Okay. So these are.
Used to use an open classroom that we had available.
Yeah.
For kids out.
Well, our doors have to be locked.
Right. The doors have to be locked. I understand that. Yeah.
So you can't.
So you really can't. So you can't have students out in the hallway.
All the time.
If there was an adult with them, I mean, you could do small groups.
Yeah, you could do small groups, but then there would have to be another adult in the classroom. Yeah, all the things that have changed, isn't it? Well, light and airflow are important. And then adding the lamps are good. Individualism, when we go to this piece, the screen. Yeah.
I was wanting to go back up there that, we've addressed light and air quality and temperature and things like that. At any point in this study, has anybody ever said anything about like the smells in the classroom?
They didn't in this particular study. They did. Yes, I know, right? Yes.
Seriously, we've got, I just didn't know the big thing now, you've got the wax burners and the diffusers and things
yeah,
like that.
The diffusers.
I know you've got to be careful with that because of, allergies and things like that, but I just didn't know if that was ever talked about or discussed.
I haven't seen it, and it's not in this study, but air quality. When they talk about air quality in this study, they're talking about the CO2. So they're not talking about the smell per se, but they are talking about the CO2, and that's why they say opening a window or opening your door, because they said when there are 30, I know we can't, but because of the 30 in, like when we put 30 bodies in a room, the amount of CO2 that's in a closed space. And so if we can ventilate or better ventilation in a room is their point about opening the door or the window.
Any memory work, the impact of smell on memory, you would think it would have some impact, but you're right, with all the diffusers now, all that, I don't like those smells myself, but sometimes it's better than the BO.
Yes.
Did they say anything about temperature? The right temperature?
They did say that you don't want it to that for temperature that it does need to be comfortable temperature. So for some people comfortable is 70, for some people comfortable is 72, for some people comfortable is 68 or 65. But they did say that they need to feel comfortable. And what they said in there is that having control over being able to individually control, which again, I know that I didn't put that up there because that is one of the things that I think is hard for us to do is to control our own temperature. But if teachers have any kind of control over, because some rooms have more light coming into them, they get hotter, others colder. So being comfortable, if a student feels uncomfortable. But one thing we can do is, like, we can't make it hotter, we can't make it always colder, but they can, suggesting the students bring a jacket or bring a sweater, so that they have a little bit more control over, and that could be something. But they definitely said with the temperature that being comfortable is important. And I think we all know that from our own learning. Like when we're freezing in a training or when we're too hot, we kind of shut down. All right, so let's go to individualism. So they talked about individualism includes the flexibility and ownership. And so they talk about having breakout spaces and learning zones. So thinking about the room in different zones of learning is important, as well as maybe breakout spaces, some places that we can all listen to the teacher, but then a space I can go if I'm going to watch a video or I'm going to do some reading, I want to be by myself. Even if all of our furniture looks the same, just like this, we could still put some of it, the way we can turn it around, or we can put some over in the corner and say that's for individual work and we're going to do this for our group work. So just having those learning zones. This was a big piece, the comfort and familiarity. That the anxiety goes up when we're in a situation that isn't as familiar. Our anxiety goes up. And so, especially in math and writing, which I thought this was really interesting, in math and writing, that it's important that we're in familiar environments. So desks and rows is not really a familiar environment, right? I mean, it might be familiar from school, but they talk about the familiarity from like what's comfortable. And so home is more comfortable, right? Or a space like a coffee shop, something that feels more comfortable, because a lot of us have anxiety around math or writing, and so being in a very school-like or traditional school-like environment is detrimental. But being in a more comfortable environment, they really saw it go up there. They saw it in all areas, but especially with math and writing. So I thought it was interesting, but comfortable and familiar. And so some of that is asking the students, what do you want in the classroom? Or how can we take what we have? We can't order new stuff, but how can we take what we have and make this a better environment? Again, kind of keep on hearing a theme here, getting the students to have a voice. And then student work, or just students being represented in the classroom. So both student work, or they said, having a place, students know where their space is to put their stuff or their name on something. So kind of the students seeing themselves in the classroom is important, and that kind of goes with that individualism. Okay. So those were key things there. All right. So let's play a little game of I Spy. And I want you to look at these classrooms, and as you look, what do you notice or see? What stands out to you?
Too much.
Too much. There's too much. If we were to think about our complexity, this would probably be not meeting. Too much happening.
And if you struggle in the middle school with too much, I know I would have been totally guilty of that as an elementary teacher.
But middle school, yeah.
Middle school probably don't.
Does it go the opposite? Yep. It goes to the too little, doesn't it, in middle school? So we need to go to the other side.
But you have teachers who are in elementary, in middle school, you have teachers who are certified K-8 or K-6 or, whatever, or the 712. And the 712 people, they don't have time for that fluff.
Yeah.
So that's the struggle right there.
Yeah. And so with those 712 teachers, we need to go back to this individualism. How are we making sure that it's comfortable and familiar with them? All right. Here's a high school English classroom. What do you notice here? What do you see here? Home. It looks comfortable. It looks comfortable. There's couches. Looks like maybe there's some traditional seating back here. But even that has some different chairs to it, so that not all the chairs are the same. That's a giant what? I know. Head lice. There you go. Okay. Oh no, this one over here is leather, so that can be wiped down. The leather can be wiped down. All right. What about this one? Is the complexity. When we think about the complexity, way too much stimulation there. The furniture might be good, but the complexity.
If they just cleared up the walls and the stuff hanging down, that might help.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So when you think about your middle school classrooms, how might you? What might be some suggestions that are actually doable, but things that you might suggest to your teachers? Could there be things that you feel like are within your realm of control of these areas? Let's go back here. Nothing up there. Yeah. So really kind of this, both the complexity as well as the individualism, if we're talking to them about the student flexibility and ownership, but then also the complexity, like put something on your walls. Let students, maybe ask students, can they help you display some things up there? Okay, so getting those cork boards covered. What else can we do?
Rearrange your furniture.
Yeah, rearrange the furniture. Maybe even ask them this question about thinking about where do they do their best work. Sometimes I do, if we had more time, I would have asked you to do where do you learn best, where do you read best, where do you create best, and where do you think best. And we did this with the lead teachers this summer. And then we asked them out of materials to design a classroom. We just like construction paper and Post-it notes and paper cups and asked them to design a learning space. And a lot of them kind of went back into these zones and thought about how they could do that. I don't know if you've seen any of them change, any of those lead teachers change their rooms, but some of you, Michelle, you're shaking your head. But we did that activity with them. We asked them these 4 things, and then we gave them some of the research, and then we asked them to design a classroom. So it might be something that you want to do with your teachers.
Sometimes one of the things in conversations with some of my teachers is that they're kind of on the extreme end of this. Mm-hmm. And I've got some who are so afraid to get out of the rows or the groups or get away from the traditional furniture. And then I've got some who you give them this opportunity and they want to order 30 bouncing balls, which really isn't what we're going for either.
Yes.
So I'm kind of trying to have a conversation with a lot of them. Finding a nice middle ground maybe. Yeah. And then obviously looking at our facilities around Northeast Tennessee, we are all sort of
older buildings.
Yeah, we're stuck with. I mean, my building's 80 years old and was built under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So there's just some things we can't do. But I find it interesting, and I love when I see teachers in older buildings or buildings that weren't really made for a lot of this trying to adapt. And I think as building principals, what we can do is, again, you talked about bulletin boards back there. That's a really easy one. That's not expensive at all. I have some teachers who've tried the whole wall paint color thing. As long as your maintenance department's on board with that, that's not terribly expensive. And some teachers love that. And then, just like with lesson plans, one of the things I have seen too on the negative side of this is that people find an idea on Pinterest and their heart's in the right place, but then they put it up and it's and it's one of those things you're just like, I really don't know if that's the direction you want to go in. I mean, they put a lot of effort into it and it's really attractive in their mind, but maybe not functional. And it's kind of functionality versus aesthetics, and you kind of have to have.
Yes.
So
you all will have a copy of. You'll have a link to the study, and so you can kind of read through it and see. And doing a professional learning session with your teachers is probably a good around learning environments. And because, like you said, we don't want them all to go out and like they're all gonna, and then they're gonna come to you with budget requests. Like they're gonna say like, okay, we need this, and that's just not really feasible for everybody either. But you also don't want them to spend a bunch of their own money or go find all these things, and then you're like, oh gosh, it ends up looking like that one classroom with too much of everything.
Just like the small kitchen table and dispatch chairs, well, that's really easy to do. Pick up at a yard sale, that kind of thing. You don't have to go to schooloutfitters.com and buy a table and that kind of thing.
One of my teachers bought the risers that you put under a bed for some of her. She just took some discarded computer desks and put them on risers and got some bar stools.
Oh, so they could stand up.
And the kids run. It's free choice seating every day in her class, and they run. They're never late. Nobody's ever late to her class because they want to get to that.
So she raised up a table.
Yeah, she just used the little plastic risers, and they're pretty sturdy. So.
I mean, and that's the conversation our coach had with Washington County, and I think Liberty Bell's with us too, but Niswonger can't afford to buy
I mean, the flexible seating, if you start going to those websites, it's ridiculous.
Crazy how expensive. Yes.
But you can do things like get the college bed risers or find a table, or like you were saying, Dr. Bales, just go to a yard sale. And that's still, kids soak that up, they love it, so I just think there's a misconception with some teachers sometimes that has to be shiny new, and that requires a lot of money. So.
But when you were talking about paint just a little while ago, I was thinking through my building, and of the non-measurable categories, 6-8, I was thinking about we in my school had the highest achievement in 5 out of those 9 for my county. So I was thinking every single one of those 5 has an accent wall painted. Every single one of those 5 does flexible seating. Wow. And the lowest, I only had one teacher in my building, and it was very much sit and get, rows, never moved her classroom. So kind of that makes sense.
There you go. So it's
just paint.
Yeah, just the paint at one wall.
Is there a color that's supposed to be more conducive to learning or calming?
There is, and here, let me. I'm going to link it right now, and then I'm going to. Let's just go ahead and give you all the link too. Let's link this. I'm going to the beauty of Google Docs. Let's.
Because I know I've read that McDonald's colors are red and yellow.
Right, the stimulation. So let's, and there are several, I have a whole bunch of resources. This is just one. Let's go here. All right, first I'm going to give you the link to all of this. So the link to all of this is here at this goo dot, whoops, not just covering it. And again, it's case sensitive, so this R capital K, P, Q, capital D, E. And that'll take you to our training site that we put all the information for coaches, lead teachers, but then it also will take you directly to the principal site, to the principal page. And we put the session from July as well as the session from today on there. So when you go there, and I'll put this back up at the end. If you want more, like I said, I have a whole bunch of resources for learning spaces. This was a particular study that I pulled this section from, this research from, but let's go here. Okay. I'm just going to show you really quickly because you asked about color. So here's the study. And if it'll pull up. They have a whole color palette, and they talk about the lightness to the darkness and the intensity of the color. So it's not just the color, but it's also the intensity that's important. I guess it's going to take a minute because it's kind of a longer PDF to pull up, but they do show you a color chart and which colors. And I think with every color, like red, like blue is calming, but the downside is that it's that it can be too boring. Or yellow is stimulating, but sometimes it's too much. And so it is about both the color as well as the intensity. Okay. So here they have this whole color chart. This is the PDF that's linked from the presentation. Let me see, naturalist. It's color is in the, well, where is my complexity one? I must be skipping over it. Individualism. Here we go. So they show you the colors and the intensity and the darkness, and you want to have both light as well, but you don't want it to be, you want the intensity in the middle here. So they explain that, and that chart is in there. Okay.
Do you have a district policy against painting?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Without approval?
Okay, so you have to get it approved. Do you have certain color? Do you have to stay within a certain color scheme? one color, and that's it. Yeah. That study is linked here on the slide, Designing Spaces for Learning. Okay? All right. So as we kind of close out this section and think about, it is more than furniture, right? Creating learning spaces is important for the student agency and that learner agency. And so it isn't just that it's the furniture, but it is creating that flexibility, letting students see themselves, but it helps with the students taking ownership. And so we have to also think about, though, just changing the furniture isn't going to change our test scores, right? The instruction has to come first, and the instruction is the most important thing. So if we change the space but don't change any of the pedagogy, we're not going to get anything different. And I think that that's an important thing. And to maybe, Mark, to your point, to ask teachers some questions also about, like, what do you want to do with what are you going to do with this furniture? How are you going to change, what is going to change? And I think, just having a little bit of, even if it's 30 minutes of learning for your staff at a staff meeting, helping them to learn, because they do see a lot of Pinterest and they do see a lot of, and they're like, oh yeah, that looks so cool. But just, if you can take a little bit of time and give them an opportunity to do some learning, whether it's your lead teachers leading something or your coach or you all, just helping them to think about, because the 1 million minutes, and it isn't 1 million minutes in your classroom, but students are spending 1 million minutes in our schools. And it's a big impact, as much as our teaching as well. So, all right. So with that, think about how to support your teachers. Hopefully we've given you some ideas today, both you as a leader are thinking about, but also things that you can take back and either you do or your coach. We also recognize that you don't have but so much time to do professional learning with your teachers. And so we're developing some online modules that are designed, your teachers don't have to do them. Let me say that again. Your teachers don't have to do these. So this is not a requirement, but we thought, you might want some support. And so the online modules could be things that are done in PLCs, during a PLC meeting, or during a staff meeting or a professional learning section. So if you're going to do them during professional learning or PLC, you probably wouldn't do it all online. You might have somebody who's going to be the lead facilitator to facilitate it, just would kind of print it out, would walk through the activity or the learning. There's typically some reflection questions, either something to read or something to watch, and then another reflection question. So something to kind of get them started, and then that. There will be 6 total of these modules. Right now we'll open up this fall through December, we'll have 2 of those modules open, and then in the spring we'll have the other 4. So they will support both personalized learning as well as literacy. So the first ones that will be open will be the personalized learning, and then go into the literacy. And so we just wanted you to know about those, so when you get the email, you'll be like, okay, I know what this is. Your coaches will know what they are, and we will also let the lead teachers know as well that those are there, but we wanted you all to know first that those will be there, and we will send you an email link. They will have to register for them. If you want them to do them individually or online, there'll be a discussion forum and kind of like an online course. They're designed to be probably about 3 hours, where like each module I'm going to say about 3 hours. Some people might be a little bit less. If you do it as a whole group, I wouldn't say it would be 3 hours. It might, but that is kind of the design with them and our intent. And that was just an optional thing that if you wanted some more learning for your teachers. Again, you can do the personalized pathway with your teachers, and there's a lot of great resources there. Your lead teachers will, I think they are coming back with us in December, so they'll have another day of learning in December with us and with the Friday Institute and the coaches as well. So they're going to kind of continue. But your coach is a big key in this, in supporting your teachers. And so we want to kind of talk a little bit more about your coach and some of the things that they're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard.
Do I need to...
Okay, there we go.
really tying in the information from this morning, one of the things that I was thinking that would be beneficial to school principals is what are we asking our coaches to look for or to think about or to help with when they're in your building. So we're going to go over that just real quickly. And this is not in your presentation. Great. And this may help you. We're going to talk about just briefly right after this. What are you asking your coaches to do, or what are they doing on their own at our direction? And then what should they be doing? And do those things line up? Looking at flexible seating and environment, obviously they're not going to see all these things in every classroom that's a part of the grant. But what they are doing is when they're at your school at the end of the day, they're logging their time and how they spent their time. So we'll have that culminating piece of data at the end. With flexible seating, are teachers up and moving around? Is there active instruction? Is there flexible small group seating? Is there differentiation time? Can students explain the learning space and the purpose of it? Can students see themselves in the classroom, and do they contribute to the classroom? Socially, is there any evidence of social reading in the environment? Are there any student contributions displayed around the room? You know, what a great way for that teacher who is posting less than in the room than to post some student contributions in the room. I think that'd be great for middle grades where we see that sometimes lacking. The students have a choice in their learning, and is there evidence of that? We haven't talked a lot about explicit instruction, but from the feedback I gather from coaches, a lot of their time has been and will continue to be focusing on literacy instruction, not just personalizing it, but figuring out what do we need to be teaching in terms of the skills to meet the standards, then how are we teaching it? Other things are, does the teacher read aloud? Do students have the opportunity or access to high quality materials? And do those materials relate to the rigor and the standards? What are students doing? Are they reading? Are they writing? Are they talking? Are they investigating? Are they listening? Are they viewing? And are they sharing? And then the 6 specific reading strategic practices. And then are they also writing about reading? One of the things that I think each of our coaches is looking at is writing in the classroom. And is the writing rigorous enough? And if it is, are you able to give instruction to where the students can meet that rigor? And then the culture of the school. Do the students have access to literature? Many of you have purchased classroom sets for classroom libraries to increase that for the middle grades. Do they have access to diverse literature? Are the coaches working with reading in the content areas? Some of your schools, they definitely are. Are the adults modeling reading? Is the library the central part of your school? How many of you here today have a library that you think is? And a lot of that depends on the librarian. I get it. Preach it. I think that's one way you can make a huge difference is if you can make the library the central hub of your school. Think about for just a minute where you are in terms of implementing personalized learning, and then also where you are in terms of quality literacy instruction. I have another handout for you. That Pam will bring around. I think I have enough. We may not have enough. You can share at your table. Two areas we want to look at. Personalized learning, we've talked a great deal. Nancy has shared a great deal, and you've learned a great deal of more in-depth reasoning with personalized learning. Think about where you are. When you're looking at this sheet, think about it as 100 points. You have 100 dots going across the sheet. Where am I? Am I at more of the beginning level with personalized learning? And there's no wrong answers here. But give some serious reflection on where are we realistically. Are we struggling? Maybe we're struggling really well and we want to do more with personalized learning and coaching responsibilities. Or are we more at the developing phase? We know, you know that you're doing some implementation of personalized learning and you anticipate further development. Or are you accomplished? The ELA teachers are using the strategies daily. Other content areas are also using those strategies for personalized learning. Think about where you are on that 100-point range. And you may be at different places for different teachers. Obviously, I think you probably would be. But if you're thinking overall in terms of your school, the culminating factor of all those teachers, where would you be on that 100-point range? Just keep that in mind for a second. And then look at effective literacy. Is there some uncertainty that exists about what to teach in terms of skill development to address the strategies? Is there somewhat of a struggle into effectively delivering instruction in reading and writing? Or are you at the developing phase? You're beginning effective literacy work with the middle grades. Some classes are now focused on specific strategies. Or are you at the accomplished phase where writing and reading strategies are aligned with state standards and you have the effective resources to be able to deploy those lessons every day? 1 to 100, where are you on that scale? That's sort of your self-assessment for this particular activity. Do you have those 2 points in your mind? Where am I with personalized learning? Where am I as a school with literacy? Now what I want you to do is I'm going to turn the learning over to you so you have some student choice and some student voice. How can you share the information you have about those 2 points? And then how can you share what you could do in addition to or stop doing, or what needs do you have? How can you share that with at least one person in the room? What's an activity you could do? And we need at least 4. This is where I'm stopping. It's up to you. I hope you were paying attention. What could we do? I'll call on non-volunteers. I know your names.
I think one of my big things, I got a small school.
Mr. Wild.
So, I mean, I've got one teacher that teaches 2 grade levels in middle school, ELA. And we had this conversation earlier. She comes from a 7-12 background.
So she has blank bulletin boards.
Yeah, the best thing I could probably do for her is modeling. I mean, she needs modeling. I mean, it needs to be, I feel like if it was effectively modeled for her by me or the coach or sending her to see it somewhere or something, that's going to be the best thing I can initially do for her, because she's kind of got that mindset. She's brilliant. She's really smart, but she's kind of like, she's more upper grades type.
I understand.
And just whole group discussion and things like that. We were talking about novels and things like that. So to get that buy-in, I think she needs to see. She needs to see it. So I would say modeling, finding some effective modeling.
Okay. So what Mr. Wiles has just done is shared whole group sharing out. One way to share information. One particular issue at his school is he needs additional modeling. Now he's at a small school.
Yes.
How many teachers teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade ELA? 2. I know some of you can't fathom that from larger schools. 2. How, if he doesn't have a model in his building, how can he utilize the effectiveness of modeling? We all know it works. How could he use it?
Visit another school.
Send her to another school.
That has similar demographics.
Similar demographics. Because you send her to East Ridge, she's going to be like, totally different.
Yeah.
Huge school, and it is different. What else?
Maybe have that coach plan with her.
Have the coach plan with her. Excellent. Have the coach model.
I guess the big part for me to go along with that is to get that initial buy-in. Why are we doing this? This is how it's effective. To see that and then show you how.
In terms of buy-in with personalized learning and effective instruction, just out of curiosity, and please be honest, there's no wrong answer here, and it's not a reflection on you. How many of you think you would be at maybe the 25-point mark in terms of just buy-in? 25 points or higher. Let's say 25 points or higher. Okay. Buy-in. What other strategy, now going back to my original question, could we use to share the information you have in your mind now? Where are we and what do I need? Whole group.
They could do some reading. Some books. Yeah. Maybe like you said, a book study or some research articles. Going back to your teacher, those high school people love to have research-based why it is. They're not the elementary that's just going to do it. They want to know why.
Articles, research on the topic. Modules that Nancy just mentioned.
I think it's a good idea also if you have it at the feeder schools in elementary and say you're doing it there, to also share that with the person that if the students are used to personalized learning and then they get into an environment that you're going to have behavior problems and behavior problems. So I think that's the expectation if you're in a district or feeder school that do that. Get more say that this is the expectation, this is what you're used to, and it will result in better behavior. Because they're learning at their pace.
Right. Do they have those habits already? Right. Or do they not? And if they don't, how can we give them those habits? Okay, what else?
Just kind of fall back to that too with the combined approach, which you kind of already talked about with the modeling. Because they have to, it will be easy for them to slip back into what they know and what they're comfortable with. And so unless they start seeing some success and that they're really kind of walking alongside and have that support in place, it will be easy for them to fall back to what they're comfortable in doing. So that it will be important that you don't just kind of do it once and then turn it over, because they'll fall back in.
Yeah, that continuity and the expectation of support. I'll be there for you. Here are the other supports I'll make sure you have. Yeah, I think that's incredibly important.
I think also when you think about, if you look at a video and you see all of these things going on, when I first started teaching, I taught with a phenomenal teacher, and I would go into her classroom and be like, okay, I'm just going to walk back out now because I can't do all of that. But then I would go in with the thought of, what's one thing I can take away and try right now? And I think it's that mindset of this doesn't have to be perfect right from the beginning. It's a process of learning and changing.
I think that's an important thing to know, because this past year I was able to attend a lot of conferences and hear from a lot of people, but one of the conferences that really just stood out to me was there were two teachers that shared, and both of them said, like, early on in their career they were about to stop teaching because the pressure of just feeling like they have to be here when in reality they're here. So having someone that is willing to allow them to take a risk and to not feel like they have to be perfect right out of the gate was important. Support was important, and knowing that they have an administrator that is willing to not just say, I'm going to provide you support, but also have those check-ins and encourage them when they do fail miserably at something, that it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. A key thing that you could do quickly is just, how can I show support for that teacher? Bullet, 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 who is at least attempting on a continuous basis to do what we've asked them to do. Let me ask you, what about where you are in terms of comfortability with your coach and what he or she is doing and what you would like for them to do? Are you comfortable? I know you won't tell me if I ask you in this big group if you're not comfortable. That's something you need to let us know if you're not comfortable, because that's what we need to do, is to address that particular issue if you're not comfortable for whatever reason, or if you need more direction for your coach. Hopefully you can look along this line of continuity and see where you are as a school, and then what you as the principal, or you may be a coach at that particular school, to see that you can do. Anything coach related you think, I wish blank in terms of the coach? I wish my coach would, or I wish my coach could. What, Amy?
Yes.
We share the same coach. She's great. She's really focused at my school. She's just focused on, she communicates well with me and with the teachers, so I know what's going on. And she, is really focused right now on just talking to them about the strategies they're using, introducing them to new strategies, and doing that research for them, because she knows how busy they are. So every week when she comes, she brings tools with her, stuff to say, hey, we found this for you.
Huge support that Brian talked about is the coach doing the research and the background work and the leg work. Right. I think that's huge, and teachers appreciate it. They love that.
This past week she asked, was there anything else you want me to do? And I said, honestly, as we get rolling with this, until we get all our technology in and everything rolling, I just want you to continue what you're doing. Support them and continue doing that legwork. Help them, because they're going to appreciate that, and it's going to help you build that relationship with them.
Having the dialogue with the coach, the teacher have the dialogue with the coach, is also I would think, somewhat of a release of your time from that key responsibility. But don't release it completely. Make sure you know what dialogue is going on. I think that's important for you as the leader, and it's also important for that teacher to know that you know what the coach is doing in that particular school and in that classroom. Any of you have a struggle with a coach that, other than we need more time? Mr. Watson?
One of the difficulties, and it's just difficult for the coaches to go into another district where there's different expectations and kind of find a way to find a middle ground between what the grant wants and what the district requires, and to try to talk to the teachers about best practices without forgetting the requirements from the district and state.
Yeah.
And that's been challenging.
We talked about that at staff meeting yesterday. What could we do, and let's just take a minute or two to think about this. What can we do as the Niswonger Foundation to help bridge the gap of what the grant's expectations are and what the district's expectations are, and how do we make those not competing interests but mutual interests to get on the right path? Does that make sense? Especially if you have coaches in your district already, or if you have a central office person, which most people do, who may be over literacy or over elementary or middle grades. What suggestions could you give us?
Well, I will tell you that our assistant director of elementary wanted to have more information directly to her. I've been forwarding everything since school started to her, but she felt like she hasn't had a good background of what we were doing and what you all wanted to do and help us do. So informing her, sending her that information would be.
And we have started doing that. It's sort of, we switched people. It moved from someone else to her over the grant in there, so she wasn't here at the initial beginning. And so one of the things we talked about was involving those central office people initially with our rollouts, with the information. So we won't have competing interests, but we know what they expect of you and what they expect of us.
Yeah. And maybe even inviting them, those, not just ours.
Right.
But to something like this.
Inviting those district people to something like this so they know and they have the information that you have and the coach has and the teacher has.
And I think that was her concerns that she expressed to me, so we've all taken care of that.
Great and excellent suggestion, and we can do that easily. What else? Other struggles?
I think one thing maybe for the coaches would be, because they're getting a lot of training as well, they're bringing a lot in, and they're excited about it.
Sure.
And so, of course, just kind of staying focused on the plan that we've agreed on, or that we're working towards, and obviously we've kind of tweaked it along the way a bit ourselves, and so obviously that communication is important, and we feel very comfortable, and we know our coach well, so that's not been an issue. But it is because we know well, and there is a lot of information too, and there's a long-standing relationship there.
Sure.
Too, you kind of get a lot of information as well, and it's just, which then could be easy to go off. So just kind of, and that may not be a problem, but I could foresee that could be an issue.
Making sure you have that communication happening with the building principal, between the coach and the building principal.
We haven't had this challenge because, again, we know our coach and know her background and her experience. But I'm wondering, outside of the coach we work with, the professional learning they have to this point, do they all have a real foundation in coaching and what that looks like? Because that's an important prerequisite to being able to go into schools and do this kind of work that we've described.
Yeah, we have varied levels of experience. We have some who have coaching experience, some who have principal experience, some who have classroom experience. The question was, are all coaches experienced or have experience or training in coaching? And the answer to that is it's varied. We have some with coaching experience, some with leadership experience, some with principal experience, some with and I say this not in a non-offensive way, but they have been in the classroom and they haven't had any of those experiences. So what we're trying to do on those Fridays that they're not in a school is to give them those experiences that are quality, and Pam's done a great job of organizing those experiences for our coaches. We're also look at conferences that help them with that particular area, not only in relation to literacy content, but also coaching and leadership experiences. Nancy and Teresa with the Friday Institute have been invaluable in providing those that coaching training with to our coaches. So, but I think you're exactly right. That's very important because it can be a little intimidating as someone coming straight out of the classroom and me going over to Michelle and saying, okay, I'm here, what do you need? And oftentimes that teacher may say, I don't need anything today. Thanks. Translation, get out and leave me alone. And that happens. So how can I work my way into building a relationship with that teacher to where she knows and trusts that I know what I'm doing?
And let me preface this by saying I love our coach. We love our coach. But initially, because I'm not a principal, I'm an ELA instructional coach in the district. I kind of wondered coming in, okay, what does this mean for me? You know, because it was like somebody was coming in to do my job. Well,
sure.
You know, so it's worked out beautifully, and I love having her there. But I was very apprehensive initially, just because I didn't know what it would look like or what that would be. And we really didn't get to meet each other until she was there in the school, and you know, the principal was there saying, you go with her and that kind of thing. So having like those people who are going to be really directly involved, having that, even a meeting that before.
Going back to what Mark said, in addition to the supervisor inviting the district coaches to a meeting so they know what we're about, plus getting that face-to-face time with the person that you're going to be expected to work with. Because while you say that's worked out great, there may be occasion where that didn't happen. And so if there's a way we can avoid that happening with our next round of schools, I think that's great, and that's a great suggestion. Any other things?
Richard, could I say?
Yes, sir. Please do.
I'm gonna talk for about 2 minutes, and you tell me where I'm wrong.
Okay.
I want to summarize a couple of things and clarify, hopefully, in case there was a misunderstanding. Richard started with talking about a coaching log, and then he transitioned into this document, and I want to make sure that you know that the coach's log isn't going back, they're not daily going back and saying they found these things or didn't find these things. The coaching log logs the kinds of activities the coach did that day. Did they observe? Did they co-teach? Did they find resources? So it's not like they're going back and daily logging, I saw this or I didn't see it.
Yeah, check.
Right, it's not
Vance did all these and didn't do these.
That's not happening.
That's a good point, because I wasn't clear on that.
Right, no, I mean, you were probably completely clear, but I wanted to make sure, so the purpose of this then is that they will naturally notice while they're there. They have a fresh set of eyes, and they see one side of it. They see the lead teacher for the most part, and they see you're there every day noticing these same things about your whole faculty. So this kind of thing is the kind of thing you can work with your coach on, who has a different perspective. You have your perspective, and then you can gradually work on a plan. And your plan that you've done the first 9 weeks needs to be different, when we come to spring. There will be a time where we have to say, okay, the lead teacher and the coach have worked together enough. Now it's time for the lead teacher to do this. How are we going to spread this to the rest of it? Or can the coach work with other groups? So hopefully, as you see this full range of things, you'll gradually start changing the kinds of interactions that you schedule with the coach. So these are things that you can notice, your coach will notice, but they're not logging these things right now. The kind of formal feedback we get on that will be from the surveys. We'll do this survey again later, this one you saw earlier, and that'll be the kind of where we start. So we aren't reporting, giving you a grade. You are putting yourself on that 1 to 100 scale. We're not doing that. Okay? So the other thing is that the coaches, the 9 coaches, will even with the treatment schools that you're in now, you may have a different coach next year. So it is very important, and we were really kind of feeling the pressure, and there was a crunch to get it going the first time, and we do know that it's good for the coach to meet, with different people in central office, and we're learning things. So hopefully as we roll new coaches in, whether that's 2 years from now or 1 year from now, and we'll be changing to other schools in your district. So this is an evolving thing. So even your school plan that you started with in August will be different as you learn more, and as the coach learns more, and your teachers learn more. You'll be revising that, but based on what you see, what the coach sees, and what changes in your school, and what doesn't change it, according to the way you want it. So that was probably maybe more than 2 minutes, but I want to make sure.
No, that was great.
But we will be looking for other coaches too. So some of your lead teachers may become the next round of coaches, or maybe some of your coaches will become one of our coaches. So we will be. So the school plan isn't static, and the coaching situation isn't completely static either.
And can I just say one more thing about this?
Sure.
So this is developed based upon research. You'll note for the literacy we use Allington as well as others. But we pulled this together as we started this grant. We worked with both the Richard, Pam wasn't on board yet, but both the Richards as well as we brought in some experts, some literacy experts and personalized learning. And because we really felt like, okay, what are the coaches, how do they know what to focus on? And so that's kind of what this document is. Kind of gives them a baseline and is a baseline for their learning. Brian, like you mentioned, a lot of the professional learning that they're doing, in addition to the coaching professional learning that they're doing, this is kind of the culminating, because we thought, okay, as we're starting this grant and as we're going to put this forward, what are those NICs? How will we know? And how will they use, how will they be able to work? Every situation is different. If I'm coaching Pam, she might have certain things that she wants to work on, but so this is kind of our guiding document that we started.
And a lot of that's affected by your individual school plans too. Right. The purpose in sharing that with you today was just to share it so you know what we're asking coaches to sort of look at and to develop.
Looking forward to difference in trying to report it and give you a grade on it.
Yeah.
I want to make sure people didn't.
You won't be getting a level from us. Sorry, and we don't have any banners either to give you. If you get a level 5, we don't have any. We can't buy banners. We can't buy T-shirts. We can't buy food. Any questions about that Look For page or the Where Am I page? And now we have. Thank you for your time. We have Tech Talk with...
What I wanted to speak to for just a few minutes, very few minutes, is a number of you have purchased Chromebooks or Nooks or other things with the money that you've gotten through the Rural Life Grant. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that you need to have, if you don't already, if your district does not already, make sure you have an acceptable use policy, okay, an AUP it's called. So make sure you have that in place, whether you're using them in the classroom or whether you're going to let students take those home. If you're considering doing that, just make sure that you have that. And another thing that I would add to that, based on E-rate funding and that type of thing, which the FCC in 2011 basically added to the E-rate guidelines a statute that said you have to provide internet safety training to your children if you want to continue to do E-rate funding or get E-rate funding, okay? So just make sure you have those two things in place before you're considering giving your Chromebooks to students or Nooks or that type of thing. Some districts do. I'm imagining every district does or should, have that in place. It's just a matter of finding it, familiarizing yourself with it, and making sure that the teachers that are involved in the grant are familiar with that as well. Okay? And that's really all I wanted to talk about with you for just a very few minutes. Any questions about those two items? Okay? Not?
Any other questions about technology?
Yes. I'll try to answer them if I can. I would stress to you, work with the tech people in your district. I can't stress that enough. Okay? Develop a relationship with them and work with them as well. Okay. Pam, we'll let you come on up. I think you're next up.
We are seeing some really exciting and amazing things going on. I'm excited with the book clubs at Bulls Gap. They have a lunchtime book club where they had so many students sign up initially that they had to move out of the library and into classrooms. We've had Family Night Book Club. I believe that's also at Bulls Gap. We've had the IFL training, and in Kingsport and in Bristol, they're doing the Marzano investment. So we've put together kind of a little rural life, high life kind of video for you, so you can see what some of the other schools around you, how they're using their rural life funds. So let's see. You've got to turn the sound down because it's really loud. Okay. The Institute for Learning from the University of Pittsburgh. So you saw some of the flexible seating. We're starting to see those purchases and how they're being used. So maybe that would be something you would like to do, send some of your teachers to observe how those teachers are using it, or just getting out, talking to each other. How is your plan developing, and the materials that you're buying. We've seen a lot of classroom libraries purchased. Some flexible, a lot of the furniture purchases. A whole lot of Chromebooks are being purchased with the funding, but a lot of exciting things are beginning to happen. So we're excited to see where it all goes and how it all concludes. So thank you.
If you didn't see your school up there,
Yeah.
you will.
Yes.
Feel free to send Pam pictures of what's happening, and we'll have coaches taking photos, and myself also. We were in school. And now we'll go Nancy to close and talk about next time. You want me to do it? While Nancy's doing that, we have, I don't know, can we talk about the swivel? One more way to use modeling is using lessons and using the swivel, and we've got our coaches on that. So if we have a great lesson that's going on at Sulphur Springs that we can share at some point with Cloud or with Interview or one particular personalized learning strategy, then we'll document that and then provide that with access to all the schools.
So when you go to that link, this takes you to a website. You'll see at the top, principals, coaches, lead teachers. We put all the professional learning resources there for the coaches and the lead teachers. This doesn't have every Friday session from the coaches, but it does have their the days that Teresa or myself are running for the coaches. So it does have those things there if you want to take a look. But for principals, we put the July session as well as today's session. So information there, and I did just put under there the personalized learning pathway with the 4 core areas. You all did the one with the 3, but the one that has the learning spaces is there. It'll force you to make a copy, just like the one you did. And then that learning spaces research. I pulled out both of those things, so if you want that, that's there. And if there's anything else that you need that you didn't get, let me know, and I'm happy to send it to you. But we'll keep on adding to here. So let me go back to the web address, and just if you write that down, that way you'll have it there.
Nancy, for the folks who might have been late arrivals or weren't here today, how do we get the data from the survey to those individuals?
I think we can. John can send it to them, or I can send it. We can send it to them. So John can get that. And I know that we had a little bit of a confusion on the time, but I'm happy to stay after a few minutes and kind of walk you through what that pathway was. We won't keep you very long, but just to kind of so that you'll know what I'm talking about when I say the pathway and what's there. I'm happy to do that.
Right. Yeah. All right. We do want to thank you from the foundation. We know we are guests in your building, and we appreciate you allowing us to be a guest. Yeah. If there are things that we need to do we aren't doing, or if there are things we need to stop doing we are doing, if you would let any of us know, then we would be happy to apply. And we just appreciate your involvement and your leadership, really, which is really key to making this a successful project for students. Any final questions? We'll meet again with principals sometime.
I think we're hoping to come back together in January and continue your learning. Today we focus on personalized learning. We're going to focus again on culture of literacy and literacy in January is our thought.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.